Okay. Again, on the last recording, I cut it a little bit short. It was in 20-something minute range. I apparently the recorder didn't detect my external microphone and was using again the built-in one to the laptop. This time I manually told it to go to the correct one, so hopefully this time it sounds better. But anyway, sorry about that. Okay, I remember that I wanted to show you the EXIF data for this, how you can find it in Photoshop. So you just go down to File and then File Info, and there it is, right there. So you can see it was at f11, ISO was at 400, it was at 18 millimeters for the lens, and it even tells the type of lens it was using, since it recognizes it as a fairly new model of Pentax lens, and everything else, resolution, so on and so forth. If there were video data, it would be here, or audio data, etc. Okay, we'll cancel that and close down this image. Oops, where is it? Here we go. So now on to restoring old photos. There's a combination of tools you can use for that. This is an image of I helped restore. Here's after, of someone I have who is a friend on Facebook who is from France, and you can see the tears in the image before and certain spots as well. So one thing you can do is to use, let me zoom in a little bit, the spot healing brush. I'm just holding down the mouse and moving it to the lower right to zoom in, and then upper left to zoom out. At least you can do that on a Mac. So let's say I wanted to get rid of this spot and that spot over there. Here is the spot healing brush. It has an icon of what looks like a band-aid. You can tweak the size of the brush. This will probably be okay. And then it gets rid of the big blemishes on the page or on the image. It usually does a pretty good job. Sometimes you have to tweak it. So I would go through here and get different. I probably can make this a little bit smaller. Get different spots. For some of the spots that are, aren't as problematic, you could go in here to adjustments and let's see, filter, noise, dust and scratches right there, and it will also get rid of a lot of your problem areas. So here's before and after. Notice it took the edge off of these areas right here. You have to be careful though, it can make things blurrier as well because it is a filter of sorts. So maybe that's a little too much, and at times it won't work well enough. In other words, it just it's not worth, it's making it too blurry, and it's not getting rid of the spots really. So you have to kind of look at each image. So I'm just going to bump up the threshold a little bit more, so it's not, if I brought it all the way down here, it's going to be more blurry. Yeah, so that's the minimum. Well, if I bring this up, as far as 1 pixel, that's as minimum as I can get it. So it might be worth doing it to some extent. I mean, you have to just decide. I don't know. It's not providing a whole lot of help on this. I guess it is in some areas. I'm noticing the eyes, though, it takes away some of the brightness. So I'll just click cancel, and I won't do it on this image. Another thing I could do would be to use the clone stamp. If I zoom out a little bit, let's use the magnifying and zoom out. I could clone stamp one area. Again, if you remember, well, let me make this a little bit smaller, quite a bit smaller. Actually, let's make it kind of large, because you don't want it to. The smaller the brush, the more hard the edges are going to be, even if I have the hardness all the way down. So if I want to blend it in, I should probably use a larger brush here, like I'm doing. Okay, so I hold down the Alt key to load an area. You can see the crosshair appears again. I want to get in between these little smudgy areas, so I don't load that. Okay, so I click the mouse once while the Alt key is held down, so I've loaded it, and then I'll just paint right there, so you can see it. It's at 50%. Maybe I want to make it 100. So there we go, and I can. Oops, you have to be careful. It will. So I'll let's sample again right here, because if you start, it's kind of hard to describe, but if you keep moving around, notice how it's moving the whole image over. Essentially, if you keep rubbing, if I keep rubbing this in, see it's so that's why you have to resample from time to time. So I could go over here and maybe sample right there. Anyway, kind of like that. That's what I would recommend doing to get rid of these tears. Even on right over here, I would just use a lot of the. You could try to use. There are some other methods. Well, I'll show you in a minute, but I don't think I would try the spot healing on this. It seems the larger area you cover, the more it starts having a problem. And that's why I think it's good for a spot, but not otherwise. Yeah, it kind of fixed it, but not completely. So I would use the clone stamp, and it's kind of tricky. You have to have it helps if you're it's kind of a art, I guess, and not a science right here, so you have to, if you're an artist, it helps. So I'm sampling right there again. I've loaded it. I'm at 50% opacity because I'm planning on doing, well, let's see, 1 second. I'm holding down the shift key, so it's each place I'm clicking, it's connecting them. I'm doing it at 50% opacity because I wanted to sample a little just right above the tear, and now I'm going to sample right below the tear, right there. And so the 50% will be from 50 from each side. That seems to be a fairly good solution. I'll also notice I select right below it, and then I go right above it, so it's lining up with the light and dark gradients, really, that I am sampling from. Okay, and there's a little more I could fix. Maybe I could even use the brush. I could dropper. Notice I used the dropper tool, dropper that's darker color, and brush in a little more to fill it in, to blend it. and I could hold down the Alt key while you have the brush selected, and it will instantly turn it over to the dropper. So I'm dropping right there, and I'll just fill it in right there. Notice the opacity is at 46% on the brush. Oh, that's too high for there, so we'll drop her again, maybe right here. So that's a pretty good job right there. Maybe I want to make it a little bit darker right there, or what have you. So I would go about it kind of that way. Oops. Rather labor intensive, so it does take some time. But you can see we've essentially cleared out that tear. So we'll go through the tears and the spots that way. Again, remember we had the other filter you can do in some cases. It's pretty effective. It wasn't as effective in this one. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, well, for this photo, I wanted to show another example of an old photo. This one is really faded, and it's an old, probably silver type exposure. I forget what they call those. I have dagger type images, but this is taken of, I don't know, some of you might recognize it. This is called the Stuyvesant house. You can hardly see it there. It's where I grew up in Florida on an orange grove. This is an orange grove of trees you can see. This used to be the front of the house, which is actually the back now. This is the side facing the lake. Used to be a railroad there, so it was considered the front. It's not anymore. The railroad is gone. Anyway, you can see there's lots of spots everywhere. Again, it's faded, it's yellowed. So there's not a whole lot to work with, actually. So the challenge was to increase the contrast and make it darker, then without having all these spots starting to appear. Say for instance, I wanted to increase the contrast here. I would just go to brightness contrast, and then you can see the spots start showing up here. So to get around that, I did a combination again of using the clone stamp and then kind of maybe filling in with the brush a little bit, dropping a certain shade, lighter shade, and then kind of lightly brushing with the opacity partway down to minimize the spots you're seeing here. Also, the dust and scratches could help this to some extent. In fact, let's look at dust and scratches just to see. I wouldn't do dust and scratches first. I would probably do that one of the last things, but I'm just curious to see what it does. I'm not going to go through a whole demo on this, but I'm just going to kind of describe what would be done. Excuse me. Okay, so before, after, you can see it does something to it. It might be of value to use that, possibly. I would zoom in more to be sure, though. Here's after the work on it. You can see there are still some spots here, but I wanted to make it, try to make it look realistic. I didn't want to just have it, the sky be completely white, or completely tan, I guess, in this case. Also, another thing I did, I used several layers, kind of like what you saw what I was doing with the Milky Way image. Different. In fact, let's go ahead and duplicate this a couple times and see what we get. Maybe making one be a overlay, and maybe this one a screen, or reverse, actually putting this one on top. Let's bring this up there. You can just drag them up. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Maybe the screen will reduce since it's so light now. Of course, it was light before. Okay, and I could flatten it. Maybe adjust the brightness and contrast, the levels, etc. Probably want to darken it a little more, bump up the contrast. Saturation is really appearing to be very high when I bump up the contrast, so that's kind of problematic. So all I have to do is reduce the saturation right here, so it brings it back to a normal color range. And perhaps I want to tweak the hue a little bit. I could do that. I could even turn it into color mode a duotone if I wanted to, or quadratone, but I have to make this so it's not a background image. So I double click on it, click OK. So now it's not a background image. Oh, it's still not. Let's see what the problem is. Let's try turning it to CMYK. Click OK. That's still not working. Well, okay, let's turn it into grayscale. Now it's black and white. Okay, now I can apply a duotone if I want to. I don't know if this will be an improvement or not, but I do this sometimes with images that are, sepia kind of toned. It's worth experimenting with. Okay, monotone. Let's try quadratone. Then we'll try some yellow there, and maybe orange, and let's use something to lighten it up if we can. Well, it didn't do a good job of lightening it. Well, anyway, you could go through here taking more time to select something, but I'll just use this for now. So it's kind of overlaid a color over it, and I could adjust curves or what have you. I'm just going to tweak the brightness contrast for now, brighten it up a little more again, maybe bump the contrast up even more, tweak the hue. Oops. Oh, I can't notice everything's grayed out because it is a quadratone right now. So we need to get it out of that. Let's turn it back over to RGB right there, RGB color. So now we can tweak the hue again. Hue and saturation. Maybe we want it to be a little more yellow. Tad more saturated. So it's looking better to some extent. Pretty, quite a bit actually, if you think about how it was. It's not quite to this level yet. And then of course, like I said, I have to fix the sky, all those spots. I'm just doing these quickly. I would, spend more time on this normally. Oops. But that softens it to some extent. And you don't want to go too far, so I would probably have started with the clone stamp, really. Small areas I could find to clone stamp. Well, I don't know, it depends. So let's try to clone maybe right. Oh, it's a little big. Here, that's kind of a neutral area with not lots of spots. So there, I hit it there, and let's try right there. I'm at 50%, so it's not completely clearing it out. But this is just demonstrating how I would go about cleaning this up. Oops, need to resample. Notice that's a little bit too dark, what I just did there, so it might be better to use the paintbrush right around here or sample a lighter area if you can find one that is free enough of spots, maybe right there perhaps. Anyway, so there's kind of an idea on this. I'll just save it as a JPEG. Okay, and if you're do enough work, it will look something like this, at least this particular image. Alright, and again, it's somewhat subjective on how you want it to look as well. Alright, moving on to tweaking how a person looks in Photoshop, making them look older, younger, fatter, thinner, all of that. I'm going to pause here for just a minute.